Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you, starting with the viewing and listening audience, to the 10th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. This morning, we are commencing our public hearing, our first public hearing in this issue, into an inquiry into the implementation of a regulatory framework for the development of financial technology and e-payments. Financial technology, Fintech. It is a new concept, a new word for many of us, and what you'll find in this area, that certainly it has widened our vocabulary, all the various new terms that we've met in this area. So today the committee is convening the first public hearing pursuant to its inquiry into the implementation of a regulatory framework for the development of financial technology and e-payment. So I'm saying the first because we're going to have a follow-up to this inquiry that we have commenced today and next month. So we're inviting the audience, those who are listening and viewing, to post or send your comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms, Facebook page, ParlView, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and Twitter. I would like to welcome officials of the Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, Trinidad and Tobago Security Exchange Commission, and Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago, who are appearing before us this morning. I am the chair of the committee, Hazel Thompson Ahi, and I invite now other members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Current JSC member.
Welcome.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Marvin Gonzalez, member.
Welcome.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning.
Go ahead, Member Hussain. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Bacchus. Saddam Hussein, member.
Good morning, everyone. Madam Chair, Hassel Bacchus, member.
And good morning, everyone. Jayanti Lachmidial, member.
Good morning, everyone. Keith Scotland, member.
That's it. Right, thank you, members. As you may be aware, the former vice chairman of the committee, Mr. Clarence Rambarat, resigned as a minister and senator on March 16, 2022. He's been on this committee for some time, and I would like to take this opportunity to record this committee's gratitude for his contributions and wish him all the best. I particularly wish to thank him for his assistance to me as vice chairman throughout the time that I've sat here as chair. I place great value on his contribution. And well, we don't have a vice chair, and you know that as Penguin sang, a deputy is essential. So the next meeting, we should have a vice chairman. I don't know as yet who that would be. But Mr. Clarence Rambarat, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've done, what you've brought to this committee, and the assistance that you've given to me as chair. I certainly will miss you. The inquiry objectives are: one, to determine the extent to which Fintech is available for use in the local economy and projections for its growth. And two, to examine the challenges that may arise with greater Fintech use and the sufficiency of regulatory measures. I now invite the officials to make brief opening remarks. Ministry of Finance, Ms. Suzette Taylor Leachy. the official.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
on behalf of the Ministry of Finance team, I thank you for the invitation to appear at today's meeting and welcome the opportunity to participate in this discussion on the progress towards implementation of a regulatory framework for fintech and e-payments. While we are in the early phases of implementation, I can say that facilitating e-payments in its various forms and modalities has been a key area of focus for the Ministry of Finance, especially over the last 2 years. We have submitted written responses to questions posed to us by the committee, and we stand ready to provide any additional clarification or information that the committee may require. Thank you.
Dr. Hilaire, Governor and Chairman, Central Bank.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and a happy Friday to all. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the JSC for choosing this very important topic. We think it is very timely, and it is quite, the value would be immense, particularly in the situation we are with the pandemic, where social distancing and restrictions on mobility are a fact of life. We think the JSC's work will also help to focus national attention and foster clear consideration and collaboration on a topic that is very complex, but inevitable for us all. With respect to your objectives, if I'm to summarize our perspective, we think that the use is at its early stages in Trinidad and Tobago. The framework is being established. There's a lot of interest and need, and we expect rapid, pervasive growth. On the challenges and regulation, we think there's a sound infrastructure already in place, but it needs to be bolstered on the legal and technology side. But we need an educated public, appropriate supervision, and a regulatory framework and base for collaboration. Like all countries, we need to evolve to keep pace in this area. Thank you very much.
Ms. Lystra Lucilio, Acting Chief Executive of Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair, and all the members of this committee for inviting the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission to this inquiry. I relay the gratitude of our board and the staff to provide the comments of fintech development in Trinidad and Tobago with specific focus on the securities industry. Fintech is an area ripe for development and rollout in Trinidad and Tobago. And as we can see from our jurisdictional country members, they have been rolling out certain aspects of it within their jurisdictions with much success. It is something that for us to be able to move forward, we need to look at the digital identities and the requirements for AML. We need to assess the risk associated with it, but also we need to be in a place for us to understand completely what we would be rolling out and what we would be making available to the country as well as the market. I thank you, and I look forward to our discussions and soon.
Thank you very much. Now we have Ms. Kylene Dowden, Legal Services from the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you on behalf of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago for the opportunity to present at this Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs to address the objectives of the committee concerning the implementation of a regulatory framework for the development of financial technology and e-payments. The Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago acknowledges that the rapid growth of financial technology presents many opportunities for the development of the financial sector within this jurisdiction. However, it also recognizes that these new technologies can be misused for illicit purposes, including money laundering, the financing of terrorism, and proliferation financing. In fulfillment of its mission to effectively detect and deter money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing, the FIUTT is committed to collaborating with the other regulators at the table here this morning, and of course, any other entity which may be appropriate for us to collaborate with, for the effective supervision of fintechs and toward the common goal of maintaining a safe and stable financial, social, and economic environment in Trinidad and Tobago. We look forward to our discussions here this morning, and we have also presented the committee with written responses, and we're ready to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dowden. Before we commence the questioning, we will have our members just identify who they are so you will know who will be questioning you. So let us begin. Members, state your name.
Yes, Chair.
State your name.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Again, JSC Lakshmi member. We are starting with the central bank, correct, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, good morning again, everyone, and thank you so much for attending our meeting today. Let me just start by asking the central bank, we want to get right into the regulatory challenges with Fintech. And you have noted that, of course, some of the providers of Fintech would not be defined or captured by the definition of financial institutions. Now, before you jump into that, could you, from your perspective and for the benefit of the viewing and listening public, break down what exactly is Fintech and give us some very as simple as possible for the average layperson, some explanations about what this concept of Fintech really entails? Because we start hearing about blockchain and cryptocurrency and e-payments, and people tend to conflate all of these concepts together and think that it's all one and the same. So if you can break it down for us and then get into what really presently is the reach of the central bank in terms of regulating any of these types of services and what you have in place so far.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, the Fintech thing is really difficult to narrow down because it is a continuum of issues. But basically, how we look at it, and I think the world looks at it, is that you have a tremendous growth in technology over the last few years. You have blockchain, you have distributed ledger, you have all these different things, all these acronyms and jargon that I'm talking about. But what they really do is to make financial transactions much easier to effect. In other words, you can move money from one place to the next, from you to your mother, father, aunt, brother, sister very quickly to the government or to or from the government via taxes or transfers, or to and from businesses. So financial technology allows rapid movement of funds. So this is the key characteristic I would like to say. For the central bank, the two characteristics that are most useful for us are, one, that they tend to involve companies that we do not regulate. So we have to learn about that. Insurance companies, pension funds, commercial banks. Two, they are involved in financial engineering that is rapid and that we have to try to understand. Some of it is unfamiliar to us. So these are the two characteristics. I know it's a complex issue, but this is I try to break it down like that. In terms of our regulatory approach, we are focused on two things. One, enabling an environment that allows this to foster, because we think it is quite important for people to be able to use technology that is affordable, that is available, that is understood, and that is pervasive, but they need to be protected. So our role is to help to provide an enabling framework, but a base of supervision that is not constricting, but that allows activity to be conducted in a safe manner. So we try to understand the governance frameworks of the financial institutions, how they would conduct their business, that they are fit and proper, and all of these things. And then we also rely on other regulators because we can't do it alone. We have the Securities and Exchange Commission that looks at the investment aspect. We have the FIU that looks at money laundering. We have the tax people that look at all of those things. Then we have to bolster it now. We think by infrastructure, so the communications infrastructure must be sound, and then we will be able to have things move along. One important thing that is critical is education. People must be able to understand what they are getting into, the risks involved, and their capacity or areas that they could go to for redress if they have a problem. So I don't know if I have made it a bit simpler, but I'm open for elaboration.
Right. So, I mean, so I understand what you're talking about, you put some of the challenges, but specifically, you know, you talk about the rapid movement of funds and you all want to create an enabling environment. Are you all presently equipped to regulate persons who want to participate in this environment? And when I say equipped, I mean legislatively, technically. Do you have the legislative are you empowered to regulate the sector in any form or fashion, one? And secondly, do you have the know-how and the technology and the capability to do it?
On the legislative side, I think we have a decent framework. One of the things that was missing was even just a definition of fintech and e-money, electronic money, for those who are not familiar with it. And in 2020, in July, the e-money issue order was enacted. So that allowed a good definition and gave powers to allow us to operate in a new framework. So we think that the legislation is there. There may be some things that you need to tinker with, but basically we think that there is a decent framework. We think the education also needs to be bolstered. With respect to your specific question on our capacity, I think we're starting off from a good position. We are used to the central bank or our supervisory team managing insurance companies, banks, and so forth. So that gives us a good base for operations. We know how to do this thing, and we are experienced in watching at balance sheets and so forth. So that's a good base. But the world is different. And the fintech world is so dynamic that we must recognize that we are still catching up. We are trying to do our best. I must say we have a bias towards control and keeping things. So we have to, I guess, to wean ourselves away from that. How are we doing that? One of the things is educating ourselves. So we talk a lot to the international organizations. We have a fintech team on the regional front. We talk to the IMF. We look at different areas. And then we've also focused our attention internally on organizing ourselves appropriately. So while fintech supervision as well as payments was in our supervisory department, we moved it at the beginning of our financial year, October the 1st, 2021, to a brand new department. This is the financial that deals with payments and financial issues. And so you have Alistair and Leslie on the call. They are in charge of that department. So we are equipping it with the right people, the legal people, the administrative people, and trying to get a deep understanding of it. But we also need to recognize that we have to be humble and to learn. So our engagement with fintech companies has been quite invaluable in getting us to understand it. So I say, yes, we have a strong base. We need to evolve. We are prepared to do so. And I think we have the right approach. And I think over time it will get better.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if I may be permitted to ask a question, please?
Certainly, Member Digitalizing.
Thank you. And thank you very much to all the participants, Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, and SEC. Dr. Heller, my question to you is to jump off on legislation and education. Is the public aware that the Exchange and Exchequer and Audit Act has been amended? I believe it has been amended to make e-payments from members of the public to different state agencies possible. If it has been amended, has it been rolled out for all services? Because I know at the Ministry of Health, we would like it to be rolled out through TT BizLink for companies and individuals paying fees for new drug registrations to be able to be done so online. And you mentioned the issue of an educated public, and I think this is important. You really hit the nail on the head. How informed is the public that if the Exchequer Audit Act has been amended, are there really, is the man in the max taxi really aware that the amendments have been made? If they have been made, what does it mean for them for paying their fees very easily? And how do we go forward now with really entrenching e-payments in the public psyche? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your question, Senator. The Exchequer and Auditor, I believe nobody knows what this is about. And I think only people would only care if it affects them, because it is an abstract concept. That's my view. I mean, the parliamentarians, the lawyers, and people who are in the know would be aware. But for people, the man in the street, this is just abstract. What does it mean? We know that recently 1,836 checks were stolen from the Sandy Grande post office. That is what grabs people's attention. What happened then? Well, the ministry had to issue notification that these checks could bounce and so forth. This is what captures people's attention. 1,836 families were affected. They could not get their grants. And then apart from that, the ministry had to kind of shut down the other, the capacity of, the supermarkets and the hardwares to encash these checks because of fraud concerns. The point I'm making is that it is when something is relevant to people that they would understand it. I believe that education is important at the central bank. We have a National Financial Literacy Program, and we are focusing on different areas, including in Fintech, to boost this. I think more education can help people. But the point you made about apart from the education, but people using the e-government services, I think that is quite critical. And to the extent that this is in place, I think it will help a lot in the transfer of government support to disadvantaged groups, the disabled, the retirees, etc., in a seamless fashion. And I think Fintech offers that opportunity, and we are here to support in that venture.
You have with you Dr. Hilaire, Mr. Alistair Noel, and Ms. Leslie Ann Devines. Alistair, can I see them? Yeah?
Yes.
Now, I suspect, I may be wrong, but I suspect that there might be people out there listening to us, because we have a wide array of listeners, and they come from all segments of society. And I always have a particular concern for people who are not as well educated as others. So when you hear, I don't think we have a high degree of financial literacy in this country. So when people put on their television or their radio and they hear in Fintech, and they hear these, they hear us speak, they may not be aware that this topic has significance in their daily lives. So if a member of your group can now just take 2 minutes to explain how, in fact, this topic is not at all remote in their lives, and they are actually using Fintech and not being aware that that is what we are talking about. I'm concerned that people may not have this consciousness. So will one of you do that for me, please?
Good morning, Chair. I will attempt to at least reach the group that you like to reach. We could look at it as service and convenience. There's a global move to get to a cashless or reduce the amount of cash used in a system, and Fintech enables this kind of status we want to be in. So the man on the street, what does it mean? It means that if you have workmen, individuals come into your house and you have to make a payment, you would not have to go out to ATMs to pay them. They have certain services that you could, one, as offered by most banks. If you know the account details, you can pay them online, or two, there are a couple proposals and solutions coming in there where they offer you what is considered like electronic wallets. So therefore, once you can identify that service provider, where that service provider wants, he wants to get paid, you can do it with ease. You don't have to go to the ATM. You don't have to think about cash. It's safe. It's secure. These are things that I'm sure most people would look, at more developed countries, and they will see these things. It's just on the central bank end. One of the things we want to do is for you to have some high confidence in these services. A lot of the banks offer online services now, or commercial banks that are regulated by the central bank. Now you have some companies that are not banks, are technology companies that delve into this area, especially of payments. They may also get into securities, but I just want to kind of stay to the group that you want us to talk to. They will provide solutions that will make payments more convenient to you. Having said that, you want to ensure that is one, you have a secure technology, you have that confidence that money is sent out, that person will receive it, and you have some protection of your information and the funds or the value you have in your possession on whatever electronic platform you're using. So basically, that is what for the man on the ground. That is the ease that fintech could create in their lives, and will be hopefully of better use. So therefore, what does that mean? You don't have to worry about counterfeiting of on currencies. It's a safer issue. You don't have to keep cash on you and that kind of manner, and you reduce your fees. I don't know if I would have answered your question, but I just gave you a flavor of, if I could elaborate if you.
Yes, certainly. And you can see the situation where somebody wants to buy a car and they don't want to meet this person in some remote place to pay over, cash, when they can actually do it another way by, online payment, things like that. So it does affect people. It's paying Fintech and, WASA and all of these things. So thank you. Mr. Scotland.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Scotland.
Sorry, Mr. Scotland had his hand up.
Yes, Chair, I don't want to interrupt Member Lachmidial, so I am in your hands relative to whether I can proceed.
No, sure, go ahead, Member. I defer to you.
Right. This is for the central bank in particular. Chair, through you, may I ask, how does the central bank see, firstly, the categories of fintech being at all beneficial with respect to our local scenario and our local situation in Trinidad and Tobago? That's the first issue. Can I ask, what would be the benefits? And then I will go into my main question.
Yes, if I may start the responses, thank you for that question. I think the benefits are tremendous, and the main thing is speed, or potential benefits, speed and security of transactions and reach of transactions. So you could move money from one place to the next very quickly, to, as I said, to your cousin, to your friend, whether they are here, whether they're in Germany, whether they're Ukraine or so. You could move it securely, and you could move it potentially without a lot of cost. So that is the one underlying benefit. Now, I'll say that this is the current set of fintech transactions are focused on movement of funds or spending, but a lot of fintech now is on credit. So what you find in particularly in African countries, people are able to get funds very quickly to improve their plant and equipment and so forth, without having to go through the traditional financial infrastructure that may be very difficult. I'm using international examples, so forgive me, but they are related to our scenario. Overall, there are about 1.7 billion people now without access to bank accounts. Small and medium enterprises are 95% of all the companies in the world, and they hire 60% of workers. So you see how small and medium enterprises and access to banking accounts are related. But most of the SMEs have very large hurdles to cross to get finance. Fintech could offer to bridge that gap. So what I've talked about is the transactions or let's say spend moving money, then the credit. And later on, I think we will get into areas such as insurance, savings, and investment. So I think now one particular area, as I just want to get back to the thing about the checks, is in a pandemic, the government naturally has to be able to deliver high quality and rapid support to disadvantaged groups. With a mobile wallet, you could do that immediately. They get it on their phone. They don't have to worry about going to the bank. They don't have to worry about. So it could move, and they could spend it. They could buy gas. They could pay somebody else to mind the children, as we like to say, and you could do it very quickly. So I think it offers a lot of potential, and I think we need to embrace that. But as Alistair was saying, you need to have a supervisory framework that is appropriate to avoid the risks, to make people understand what is happening, and to really take care of certain issues, novel issues such as cyber attacks and data insecurity and so forth. But I think the potential is tremendous, and it would reach the people directly, particularly in the area of transfer of government funds to the disadvantaged.
Right. Chair, the issue that I've looked at, the central bank does have a regulatory and fiduciary duty to have oversight also with banks. I'm talking now about the private banking sector. How does this new approach, how does it mesh with the current existing private banking sector in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, perhaps I could start, and my team could elaborate it if they wish. It is intimately linked because we are talking about movement of funds, and traditionally the banks are the ones that are specialized in that area. So one, it offers potentially some competition with banks because they will say, wait a minute, money is moving out and I'm not getting a cut out of that. I'm losing out. What is the response of the banks? Well, they do two things. First of all, they join the club. So they embrace fintech technologies in their own operations. So now the banks are moving people more to online platforms, and all of that is the fintech direction. So they are joining that to try to deal with the competition, but also they are embracing the complementarities, because some fintech firms now have a reach that they don't have. So they join with fintech firms to complement them, and some of the fintech solutions, as maybe we'll discuss later, are actually going through banks. So it's either they embrace it one way by doing their own fintech schemes or working with existing fintech providers. So in terms of our role now as a central bank, we have to be aware of that and monitor what the banks themselves are doing in that area. Be concerned about something called, it's a big term, but it's called regulatory arbitrage, where people will try to get the lowest regulation and insert themselves into that. I'm talking about companies trying to, so we have to look out for that and make sure that people are secure. And then as we get into managing more fintechs directly, then we look at the complementarities and so. So it's a holistic approach, and I hope I've kind of addressed something what you were asking.
Chair, I would defer to Member Lakshmi Dayal and you, and would crave your indulgence to come back to my other issue questions, please. I don't want to hijack the...
All right, thank you very much. So we'll have Member Lakshmi Dayal followed by Member Marvin Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, through you, I have a lot of questions coming out of of that discourse with prompted by Member Scotland. With respect to the rapid movement of funds, whilst there are many benefits, there's also a substantial amount of risk. Now, you talked about the traditional banking sector, we talk about risk. So let me put my questions to you and you can take them one by one. The first thing is, risks involving, fraud, money laundering, and so on. What is the central bank doing to mitigate against those risks where you have fintech being deployed? We have also issues, and I'm concerned about this. When you have firms participating in this fintech environment that are not local but are international, how does the central bank, you mentioned having dialogue with them, but how far is your reach in terms of monitoring and regulating these participants in that space? And then I have a question with respect to de-risking by the traditional financial institutions, because we have noted for some time that because of the AML CFT measures, that a lot of banks have embarked upon some de-risking, and they have been, what is the word of it, unbanking some of their clients. I think this committee or another committee I sat on, we heard from the SME sector about the challenges that they have faced with the traditional banking sector. If this, the availability of fintech, financing, credit, all of that is going to, provide an alternative to the SMEs, which are particularly vulnerable, what is the central bank contemplating in terms of protection? Because I'll tell you this is a country where people line up outside the bank on the last Friday of every month to cash their checks. But those same people will also get an email that a Nigerian prince left them a significant inheritance, and they just need to provide 2 forms of ID in order to get it. And I think we have a really big challenge in our hands, and I think that it falls to our regulators to really embark upon some aggressive action to protect members of the public from themselves. Because essentially, when you listen to these stories, and I've heard many of them over the years in various incarnations that I've been in, some of the things that people do willingly and voluntarily get themselves into are really, and there's something sexy about all of this fintech and cryptocurrency. I think that people just seem to be drawn to. And I say, these are the people who will line up and cash a check by a grocery or something else, but they seem drawn to these types of things, and it is attractive. So how are the regulators going to really save these people from themselves in the absence of a really stringent legislative and regulatory framework?
Yes, thanks very much. I will try to answer it as I have it in four sets of questions: 1 on risk, 2 on international entities, 3 on de-risking and fintech, and 4 on protection and the nature of people being seduced by this activity. On the first one, yes, that is a very important thing, because if you move funds quickly and anonymously, well, you really open up yourself up for
money laundering. That is money
laundering and all this sort of. Yeah. Exactly. So and it could be very quick. So we have already an established framework for dealing with the commercial banks and the traditional insurance companies on this, etc. So this will be part of what goes over. We continue. We have a whole department or a division in our supervision department on anti-money laundering and so forth. We work very closely with the financial intelligence unit and moving this thing along. So fraud and all those areas, we work very closely with our core regulators, and we try to engage with the traditional institutions now on credit risk and those sort of things. And that model will carry us over when we have to regulate the fintechs. Just as a related matter on the whole issue. The fintech thing is not new. It was exacerbated or kind of brought to greater attention during the pandemic. But the international cooperation of which we are part is long-standing. For example, in 2018, we had this collaboration among virtually the whole world at the IMF World Bank meetings in Indonesia called the Bali Fintech Agenda. And at that meeting, the IMF and World Bank led the story, but with other regulators and other institutions and countries to propose a big agenda for the world that is focused on several things. sets out 12 elements related to 4 main buckets. One is enabling fintech, 2, ensuring financial sector resilience, 3, addressing risks, of which you talked very eloquently about, and 4, promoting international cooperation. So in this area of risk, just to summarize, we have a framework that we will extend to others, but work with the co-regulators, and we are part of the international community that is addressing this. On the second matter of international entities, yes, most of these things come from abroad because people are linked in. You have your account outside. You buy stuff on Amazon or so. Then you are into fintech. You have to do PayPal and so forth. We do have a limit on what we can do with big international companies. We must recognize that. We may not have jurisdiction over them, and we may also not be able to prevent people from engaging with them, because if you have to have a transaction to buy anything, you may need to do it. The 2 things that we will do in that, or continue to do, one, education, so people should at least be aware of what they may be getting into, and the risks involved, and that they may not have redress on the local front. So I would admit that we would not be able to, let's say, manage all international companies that have fintech products that locals may want to get involved in. With respect to the de-risking matter, yes, this is a huge issue on the international scene as well as the domestic scene. Internationally, you would know that even the Caribbean was at the forefront of telling the global community that, listen, international banks are saying small countries are risky and therefore they are cut off from international finance. So that has translated into the domestic sphere and local spheres generally, where banks or financial institutions that want to either make profit because they say, well, this guy is too small, I don't need to work with him, or they want to be so safe because their head offices are saying, listen, you have to have people that are, pristine. They have to have good character, they have to have financial accounts. But the flip side of it is that many people may not. They may be excellent people, good souls, and so forth, but they do not have a track record of financial, knowledge or financial transactions. So they could be left out. So de-risking is a big issue. What we have been emphasizing to the commercial banks in particular, you need to look at those things. Recently we talked to them, and the Ministry of Finance was part of that endeavor to reduce some of the strictures. You have to have 2 forms of ID, all this sort of thing, to kind of lower the barrier while not increasing their risk. But we also tell them that, listen, in Trinidad and Tobago, you have a responsibility to be part of a national financial inclusion exercise. So for cashing checks for pensioners and so forth, please be aware of that and make special effort to embrace the young and the people who may not have access to account. The fourth aspect you talk about is protection. How do we protect? Well, again, we try our best to educate. Where there's legislation, we could use that. We have a bunch of controls. We have guidelines. We could take away people's licenses, but we don't want to do it in a strangling fashion. We want to be able to do it in a responsible fashion, and we are learning. But we have many of the tools. But to the extent that there needs to be some shoring up, we would welcome that. And the last thing, yes, fintech is seductive. You see all these things on TV. You could do this very quickly. Don't worry about it. Just put in your number and you get money. Don't worry. But yes, there is an attraction to it. Education, we think, is the key. We will continue to work with it. And I think all arms, the government, the parliament, whatever, would embrace that, and the other regulators, so that everybody kind of understands you can do it, but there may be risks, and you have to be aware of that and then take the necessary precautions. I mean, I went through a lot. I don't know if you want to, want me to elaborate.
There's just one thing I wanted to ask about with respect. You touched on it as the simplified due diligence requirements. And from my personal experience, what I've found is that and you mentioned the banks who, look at what their head office is looking at. When you have the traditional financial institutions that have an international presence and they are guided by the guidelines and regulations and the compliance programs of their parent companies, which are out of the jurisdiction, they tend to be out of touch with the reality. The reality of Trinidad and Tobago is that some people still are operating with a light pole number. The reality is that some people don't have an electric bill or a utility bill in their names. And these are the most vulnerable people in society. And they are the ones who we are seeing are being unbanked because of the risk and because of the stringent requirements. So I just by way of comment, I think that the requirement in law, which is there in the law, and it is recognized internationally by FATF and so on for simplified due diligence, I think that the regulators need to do more to perhaps persuade the traditional financial institutions to not simply de-risk by unbanking people and pushing them now in the direction of trying to use fintech, which they themselves may not really truly understand the risks involved. So that's just my first comment. The second thing is, when you're participating in forms of fintech, there's some mechanism that you have to use in order to get into that system. Whether you're using, something as simple as, let's say, PayPal, right? That's a very, very simple example of something that's been around for a while, right? And I use it simple because this is maybe the one that I probably understand. I don't even understand all of this stuff. But if you have to put money into a PayPal account, which you could then use because you don't have a credit card, you have to have a mechanism, or it has to be like a credit card or something local through a financial institution here to get that money into your PayPal account, which you could then use on different websites and all of that. So are you all considering greater scrutiny or asking the traditional financial institutions to exercise a greater level of oversight and scrutiny in terms of the types of transactions that people are embarking on in order to capture where people may be getting into something that's a little bit risky and so on? Because the banks have the ability. I'll give you an example. If you do 3 successive transactions for the same amount of money at one particular local bank, they block your card. And I had that experience myself, much to my dismay. Because, they want to know, well, why are you withdrawing a maximum amount in each transaction 3 times in a row? And it was, well, I need my money, right? But they will do it. So they have set things up. If the banks, for example, take note of someone wiring money to a particular thing or transferring funds via credit card to some online platform or something like that, is there a mechanism that the central bank could use, or can you at least use your moral suasion, which I know has become a dirty word in regulation, but your moral suasion to sort of encourage the banks to, as we say, protect people from themselves and to capture these things and also to perhaps report them because they may be linked to attempts to launder money or evade taxes and all of that. Is that something that you think is possible from the perspective of a regulator?
Yes, thanks again. With respect to your first thing on simplified due diligence, I agree with that wholly. I think sometimes in Trinidad and Tobago, we have too many things to write down, too many things that may be unnecessary. So I believe we can simplify where it is appropriate, and we can also talk to people about reasonably putting things in place, because you don't want to know who your customer is. You don't want to have nefarious people involved in your business. But you have to be aware of circumstances. So I think a more concerted approach to looking at exactly what is there, what are the requirements, and paring it down when necessary. I agree with you wholly on that front. With respect to the... sorry?
No, go ahead. I thought you had finished.
Oh, no. Sorry. A two-part question. So with respect to the things on PayPal and scrutiny, I think we do encourage the financial institutions, and I think they do have it within their objectives to scrutinize not only to note the value of transactions, but the pattern of transactions, and to be able to work out if there are any things that draw attention to themselves, because you could have somebody that is saying there may be a limit on something of $10,000. and they just go to, well, they just do 9,000, 9,000, 9,000. So you have ways of circumventing things. We will be working with them to look at credit carefully. Our money laundering team is not just looking at numbers, but looks at how things are done. And the FIU also looks at how things are done. So yes, I agree. We will continue to do that. Of course, you have to have a balance that because you don't want them to stifle things, but we want to be able to have informed understanding and be able to detect patterns of illegal activity.
Thank you, Dr. Hilaire. Now, can I have Ms. Member Mitchell still want to ask this question?
Gonzalez,
if not, we will take Gonzalez, sorry.
Yes, Chair, I know a lot was said a short while ago. But I take note of what Dr. Hilaire said and everything that he had to say on this particular matter. And, I'm forced to ask the Ministry of Finance officials or even Dr. Hilaire if he can answer the question whether or not there is any potential benefit for the public service or state enterprises to utilize fintech services in order to expedite and to make more seamless, transactions being conducted by the public service as well as state enterprises.
Well, I guess I could start. I don't know if protocol allows the ministry to answer, but anyway, let me. I think there is tremendous benefit, and I think this is really the area that we need to work on. I think I mentioned it, but during the pandemic, a number of countries actually worked to lower the cost and increase the limits on digital transactions. So, like Ghana, Kenya, Myanmar, they had programs to do that, to be able to facilitate transactions during the pandemic, given the nature of it and the need for support to disadvantaged communities. But more specifically, in the case of countries such as Namibia, Peru, Uganda, and Zambia, they actually had increased their mobile money networks to deliver government transfers more efficiently, because they knew it was there before, but they needed to move money out quickly. So I think there's a tremendous scope. It is immediate. I think Ms. Lichi had talked about in her opening remarks, that you can move money very quickly. They don't have to have too much of a fuss. You have to ensure that the people are the people who they are, but you could do that. And I think there is a tremendous amount on the delivery of social services.
Okay.
Of course, also on the tax front, because you could receive taxes via e-money, but you don't want to make it too onerous, because now I think it's a bit tricky to even pay your taxes online, so you don't want to make it too onerous. But yes, all government services, whether it's taxes or welfare payments, salaries, I think already go through, for the most part, through the thing, but welfare payments, I think that is high value. Paying for, somebody wants to do an eye exam or some kind of thing, you do that very quickly. So yes, I think the scope is immediate and it is very easy to do, but the infrastructure must be there. Proper communication, you must have the infrastructure set up, you must have people being able to monitor it, because you don't want a cyber attack to down the whole thing, and you don't want data to be just people's personal information to be spread around, the country. All that would help to create distrust in it, and that's the last thing you want. You want people to be comfortable, they get it, and they do other things.
Right, leads us right into member backers.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just want to move a bit to the local landscape and specifically what is happening with local companies. In the submission, it was identified that there were, I think, 43 companies that had gone into in the applications and working through what you describe as your innovations hub going forward. And only a subset of those have gotten to another stage of what it is. Could you just, briefly give us an idea of that Innovators Hub, that process? Why, whether or not the number that I'm going to represents a norm, or is it just because we're in the embryonic stages? And what is the future for that with these local companies making applications? And then how does that work going forward with this as an industry on its own?
Yes, certainly I could start, and Leslie or Alistair could elaborate if they wish. Just to put it a way of background. As I mentioned before, this fintech thing has been burgeoning for a long while. We had a Bali agenda, we had a whole set of things, we had the pandemic, people are using it whether they like it or not. So you have to be aware, you have to be informed, you have to move things along. In Trinidad and Tobago in July 2020, that e-money issue order. What it simply means is that it creates a framework for regulation on this thing. So that's excellent. What the central bank and along with the FIU and the SEC did in October 2020 is to say, well, listen, we are getting a whole set of queries. We are getting expressions of interest, and we need to coordinate this thing. We need to have one go-to place where people could engage. And so this is where the Innovation Hub was set up. It's a portal, nothing more than a portal where people could ask questions, interact with us, provide us with their business models, what they're thinking, what is the future, what is the regulation about, and then they could also go on to the stage of an application. This has proved, as I said, extremely valuable on two fronts for people to know what are the conditions and standards for doing business of a financial nature in Trinidad and Tobago. And secondly, for the regulators themselves to understand it, because it's so dynamic, it's so new. Everybody's coming at a different product. And sometimes you start the conversation with them today, they give you the business model. 2 months down the line, you're talking to them, they change because, they see something new. So it's very dynamic. So that's how the Innovation Hub came about. In this formally, we had about 43 participants join in, ask questions and so forth. Some of them went on to the application stage, and that's been processed now. But it's in a whole range of things, from people want to do cryptocurrency, e-wallets, peer-to-peer transfers, you name it. They're involved in it. They want to think. So we think this is a good nucleus for moving forward. We think there will be much more interest in applying, and that some of those that are in the application phase will get licenses. Once we sort out the due diligence and governance and business model issues with them, and make sure that people are safe. So we think the future is ripe for a lot of these things to burgeon in Trinidad and Tobago, but we want to make sure that the regulation is sound, and that people are not going to a space where it actually is counterproductive. That you rush things, people get burnt, and they say, see, this, I don't want to part of that because it's too much problem. So this is where we're at now, and this is where we think the future will be.
Thank you, Mrs. Scotland. Mrs. Scotland has been waiting for a while.
Not seeing him.
Mr. Scotland, has he left us? All right, you take it then.
Sorry, I just want to stick up a quick thing there. You mentioned moving on to the licensing phase. Is it the intention of the central bank, once you are satisfied with these 43 participants move forward, that you will have them licensed as financial institutions to operate within the fintech space and to offer certain products, of financial nature, offer services of financial nature?
Well, the 43 are the ones who formally entered and asked questions. And
right.
So depending on the questions, they may have modified what they're thinking, and they may say, well, maybe I'll apply, maybe I won't apply, maybe I'll wait later. So only 6 of them have gone to the formal application phase. So those are the ones that
what exactly? Application for a license to be?
Yes, an e-money license to do certain things such as providing electronic money, peer-to-peer, meaning person-to-person transactions using a mobile phone, person to businesses or business to person, or to provide it from the government to persons or persons to the government. Those kind of things. So we are
of the 6 Sorry, of the 6 that have moved on, are they local companies incorporated in this country, or are they foreign-based companies looking to enter the market and get into financial services here?
I will have to ask Lesdian on that, but I believe they're all local, but the difference between local and foreign now is so blurred because these guys move all around the place. They may have, people from the Caribbean and so, but I believe they're all incorporated locally. But maybe I could ask Lesdian. Well, I don't want to kind of, break protocol.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Yes, so just add a little more to the conversation. These entities are applying under the e-money order to come into this space to offer e-money services, where it will then facilitate persons being able to make peer-to-peer transactions, whether it's business to business or business to person. And so of those 6 applicants, I will say they are local, but they may have some foreign
participants, relations.
Yes.
Yeah.
In your submission, Central Bank submission, you mentioned a regulatory sandbox was set up, allowing for qualified companies to test and modify their products locally in a controlled setting monitored by 3 regulators. Now, you also mentioned that the central bank is taking a measured approach to the implementation of the central bank digital currency, and you've studied the technical aspects carefully in collaboration with the other regional central banks, the IMF and SEMLA and so on, and you're currently continuing to review the experiences of several countries in pilots, Uruguay, Jamaica, and Nigeria, and then countries at a fuller stage of implementation. And you mentioned the Bahamas, the Eastern Caribbean, etc. Now, I was fortunate to have a conversation with someone from the Securities Exchange Commission in Bahamas last night. And she said to me that there is no sandbox in the Bahamas. And what is felt that you allow the activity to occur, that the regulation is being built on top of the activity, and it's not the best approach because they believe that once they're operating in the sandbox, it's difficult to get them out. So can I have your views on what Bahamas is saying, since you regard them as someone who's done quite a bit, and you're going forward. Are you going to take into consideration, since you're studying what is happening in the Bahamas, and this is the view that I'm getting from the Bahamas authorities?
Yes, let me start on it, and thanks for that very important question. Now, as was mentioned before, we have companies that are approaching us for licenses. Now, there are 2 ways of going about it. One is saying, okay, you go directly into a license. Or 2, you have some companies, if you think it necessary, a space on a period, 6 months or whatever, where you kind of test the ground in a controlled environment. So all the sandboxes is really, as the name implies, a play area, castles and sand or whatever, where companies can test out their products. We can observe what is happening on the local scene, but they have an opportunity to change, and we have an opportunity to modify what is going on without having them giving them a full license, because this could actually make them move faster into getting a license because they have a test environment. So that's all the sandbox is, a test environment. Many countries have decided that they could use that depending on the circumstance. Not everybody has to go through the sandbox. If your product is well developed, it is sound, it has 100% thing, we do that. But if you want to have a controlled environment, this is where the sandbox comes in. With respect to the Bahamas' position on a sandbox, well, you could do it that way too. It really doesn't matter. You could determine that you go directly to licenses. But the issue with that is that sometimes it may take so long to get to the licenses phase that you don't have the opportunity to test. So it's really just a testing ground that could help to facilitate the movement to full licensing. I don't know if it is clear. So we don't have a problem with that philosophy of going directly, but what it means is that people may just be waiting a long time without having a testing period. So we think the testing period could actually help to iron out kinks and so forth, as opposed to, straight on the road and come like somebody, you have an L on your vehicle, so well, you watch this guy, you could turn at any time, as opposed to, you just study it and then you get a license. So that's just an analogy on this.
Thank you. So are you satisfied with the level of regulation that we have in place now?
I think we have a decent basis. Yes, I think we have that. I think we need to bolster certain things. My answer is somewhat hypothetical since we don't have any fintech companies that are actually licensed. So that when we reach the licensing phase, we have. So the first one is getting them on the road, as it were, licensed. We have to work on the monitoring part. Over time, I think we are well prepared for that. I think we will be able to do a good job, but we haven't done it yet because it is still coming. But I just want to emphasize that we need to have our capacity that is not just focused on hardcore regulation, but that is enabling. So we will continue to work with that and to educate people and so forth. But I do think we have a strong basis for moving forward.
Are you familiar with the Bahamas legislation that came into force in December 2020?
No, not.
It's called, all right, it's called, for short, DARE, is a Digital Assets and Registered Exchanges Act 2020. So perhaps since you're in this stage, you can have a look at it. We can have a look at it as well. The government can have a look at it. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel, especially people have had something and it's working. Perhaps we could consider what we want to put in our law and what is there, how we can marry our two, because everybody has the same goal, All right.
Chair, if I may, through you, just have one question for Dr. Hilaire. May I proceed?
Yes, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Hilaire, have you considered, or would it be something that is worth considering when you get to the licensing phase, because you're trying to strike this balance between creating the enabling environment and the regulatory framework, that you have sort of a phased rollout for these licensees in terms of the type of products they could offer and to whom it can be offered. Because as you said, it's difficult for you to test your regulatory oversight when nobody's actually operating. So when they do get licenses, would it be something that is possible pursuant to the e-money order and all of that you can give them sort of a test run rather than unleashing them fully onto the public, who we acknowledge are not the most sometimes financially literate groups, and there are certain vulnerabilities. So, for example, allowing business-to-business type e-payments and transfers initially, so that you have a little more tech-savvy and financially literate population being the guinea pig, so to speak, when it comes to these persons entering the market, as opposed to a full-fledged licensing and rollout where you can offer it to anybody. Because my concern and my absolute bottom line concern here is really the targeting of people who would simply be too vulnerable and not know how to protect themselves from the negative effects of this type of activity. Is it something that would be possible?
Yes, it is. Yes, no, it is possible, and this is actually, and I agree fully, and this is the philosophy behind the sandbox. So the sandbox actually is an area where we would test out. So you could, let's say we give a provisional license to a company for e-money services, but it must be only in, I don't know, the Chaguanas area, the Point 14, whatever it is. And it must be only among A, B, and C. And you need to do so, and we need to monitor it carefully, and then we go ahead. So that is one aspect which you mentioned, which is a testing period. The other one, which is related to that, is a limited scope arrangement, which we already have in our armory for banks and insurance companies, etc. So we know a company, and companies come with all sorts, they want to do the work. So listen, come on, you do this now. Let's see how that goes. So you could get a license, but you get it for this activity, and then later on you get it for another one. So yes, those two are part of the.
So a quick before you walk and before you run type of approach, both on perspective of the operators as the licensees as well as from the regulators, because I think it's a learning curve that everybody is going to be on in order to understand, and legislators as well, because we have to see where we want to take it. So thank you very much for that.
Most welcome.
Well, I was going to take you off the hot seat, Dr. Hilaire, but it seems that, we want to keep you there a little longer. Before I go to Member Gonzalez and Bacchus, I'd like to ask a question that came from social media. And it says, most business in Trinidad and Tobago, I suppose businesses, have evolved to a completely online businesses, website, Instagram stores, Facebook stores. However, a challenge is our credit card penetration rate. Realistically, the majority own debit cards, but cannot use them online, which hampers business development. Could the committee kindly consider this in the deliberation? I'm throwing that out to you, sir.
Yes, I think that is what we would want to encourage. Now, let's put it this way: a company that is selling services wants to be assured that it is getting its money. So, what does it do? It says, I need to have a credit card that I can recognize from a company that I can recognize, and therefore I will, sell you the shoes or whatever from abroad. If the debit card does not satisfy that for the company, then they would say, well, I don't know this thing, I don't. So this is where the international cooperation comes in, mutual recognition of products and standards. And if there are standards established and people know that they could have confidence in this activity, then they would do it. But apart from that, there are always other business opportunities that come in. So people may not use a credit card, they may use PayPal or they may use some other form, or you could then transfer your money. It may seem a bit circuitous, but you could transfer your money via mobile app to your cousin in New York, and then they make the transaction for you. At least it helps to facilitate. So the basic point is that yes, but it depends on the receiving company what they want to accept, and two, that fintech offers the opportunity for products that may fill this gap. Because even to establish a credit card, a bank giving you a credit card will want to know the world and will want to know that you could pay it back, to all these things. So otherwise, you're not getting it. The fintech company may say, well, you have a lower level of due diligence, a lower level of requirements, and you get credit easier. So yes, I think you could have the possibility of using fintech to fill these gaps where people want to transact but don't have the traditional instruments.
Thank you. Member Gonzalez, please, followed by Member Bacchus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, not wanting to remove Dr. Hilaire from the hot seat, perhaps I will ask for the intervention of members of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Ministry of Finance, or FIU, to give me or share perhaps their perspective on this comment. Now, Dr. Hilaire said in his opening statement, and I took note of it because I found it was quite profound, that this topic is very complex and it is inevitable, and we expect rapid and progressive growth moving forward. And part of the thing that we need to appreciate is the importance of educating our public. Now, I get the sense from hearing from Dr. Hilaire and from some other members of the institutions that are present here before us, that it seems as though that the approach being taken by some of our agencies are a bit disjointed. I don't get the sense that everyone is on the same page. Perhaps there is a need for some strategic action plan, identifying some goals and strategies that are needed to really pull this thing together, to prepare Trinidad and Tobago, especially our financial system, to, from what, as Dr. Hillier said, the inevitable, because it seems as though if we don't do that quickly, it will impact the ease of doing business. It will impact the attractiveness that we need, to have our economy being pushed forward. People may not be interested in investing or doing business or in our economy. This seems to be very, very critical. And I get this sense that all of the agencies present here before our central bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Ministry of Finance, FIU, TT, they need to come together and formulate a strategic action plan, identifying some strategies and goals, etc., to really put this or set the necessary infrastructure in place so that we can create that space in our economy, taking into consideration, of course, the security issues and all the other issues that we mentioned during our discussion this morning. But ensuring then that, we can't prevent the inevitable from happening, but not wanting to miss a bus, because we have to ensure that our economy is attractive and that it remains in tandem with international best practice.
Thank you. Mr. Bacchus, Member Bacchus.
Thank you, Chair. And the hot seat actually remains. The two things. One, specifically to deal with cryptocurrency. I know the central bank had sent out an advisory relative to cryptocurrency. Yet cryptocurrency is, for all intents and purposes, a facet in one area of fintech. How does the central bank marry that and make sure that fintech is not branded as a cryptocurrency thing, and therefore either the negatives or the positives associated with that are separated, and how does the bank deal with that? Secondly, it has to do with, again, back to the local side of things. The appreciation of a cashless society really speaks to the ability to do transactions across a broad spectrum of things. It's not just, and I mean, for those of us who are banked and probably banked, we probably could transact everything because we have the appropriate cards and so on. But when you get down to the merchants at the individual level, in the markets where significant transactions happen, and I'm talking about the local markets, your ability to go and pay for things on the street, all of that, itinerant vending and those things. How have those merchants, or has there been any interest expressed, gathered by any of the entities as to their willingness to participate in this? Because it's not just about me being able to send money to England to my sister, but this is about me being able to walk down the street on Frederick Street and purchase something doing that, because it brings the benefit to the underbanked, the unbanked, and the unbankable. So it's those two things. One is the cryptocurrency piece, and that is the application of fintech at the base levels, where, strangely enough, is where the majority of the cash transactions are happening.
Yes, Chairman, should I go ahead?
Yes.
All right. Just to I noticed Member Gonzalez had asked some question, but I wasn't sure if to jump in or so. But just to kind of comment briefly on what he said, I think that is quite important, and I think I really welcome this joint select committee because it kind of helps to focus the mind. The regulators have been working together, but listen, preparing for this thing, you have to really focus very closely, even more so. So I welcome that. In the central bank, we are actually, ramping up our engagement or discussion on the issue, and in particular, looking to see whether our approach, we need to modify our approach to be more open to different possibilities. So yes, I do agree that a coordinated approach is important, and we will strive to do that. With respect to the questions, I think that we have on the cryptocurrency, the central bank's view is as follows. We welcome people innovating and using different financial instruments But cryptocurrency has certain characteristics that you need to be very wary of. First of all, in a sense, it's based on almost nothing. You know, you don't say, well, okay, there's a factory that is building, that is making vehicles, or there's a mine that is mining iron ore or copper or something. It's kind of just by itself. So what that means is that it's fabricated kind of out of thin air. I mean, it seems like going too far, but what that means is that the value could fluctuate wildly. What happens now? People invest in it and they only look when it's going up. Well, when they lose their shirt now, what do? They have bills to pay, they have things, their families in distress. They come to the central bank, they say, well, we can't help you. So at least they know the risks involved and they are fully aware of what they are getting involved. And this is why the regulators, as you say, FIU, Central Bank, SEC came together to issue a statement warning people about the issues involved in that area. So that is how our approach to it is one of warning people. We know that we cannot prevent people in their own space from getting involved in it if they want, up to a point, but we are warning on the severe risks involved, fluctuating values, that you could have money laundering, you have all those things, and then recourse, you don't have any recourse to us. With respect to the cashless society, yes, we think this is quite important. What is the interest of people? I think Trinidadians are very, very Trinidad and Tobagonians, are very, we embrace anything very quickly because we are very savvy and we are very innovative and we want to be on the cusp of things. So I have no concerns about people being able to engage. I think the interest will come once you see that you can get your money quickly, seamlessly, without hassle. You don't have to go to a bank. You don't have to look at, currency with my name on it. You just have to go and you get your wallet and your phone and you do your transaction. So I think it'll come very naturally, very easily, but they need to understand it and they need to have trust in it. If it falls apart, forget it. So that's why the infrastructure is so important. I think, as I said, government services, movement of money from one person to the other, buying bills, and then we go into getting credit now too. I think the world is open to it.
I don't know. Sorry. Yes, I don't know if you're at liberty to answer this question at this coming from social media, but I'll pose it nevertheless. Was iGovernment TT and or the TT International Financial Center Company within the 6 companies that applied for licenses under the e-money order?
Leslie, you want to take that? As I understand it, the International Financial Center is a facilitating agency for Fintech, and the iGov is the agency for the government to facilitate transactions. So they would not be the operators per se. And we do, I must acknowledge that we do think that they have a tremendous amount to give in this sphere. As I mentioned before, we are more an enabler, whereas the IFC would be more of a promoter with the other fintech companies, international businesses, and so. And the iGov may be the implementer of moving money from government, etc., etc. But I don't know if Leslie wants to comment on this.
Nothing additional to add, Governor, at this time. Nothing additional to add at this time.
Can I ask a quick question, please, Chair? I'm sorry, I know we're taking very long with the central bank and we have everyone to move on to, but anybody can answer this actually. With respect to I think one of the key components of building trust is if people understand that they have redress if something was to go wrong. And that redress can come from 2 places. It can come from the regulators, but it could also come from law enforcement. Has the regulatory society who we have here before us, have you all engaged or examined in any particular depth how the capabilities of our law enforcement agencies to deal with or impose criminal sanctions where persons become susceptible to schemes. And again, do we need a strengthening of our legislative framework so that we don't have certain types of activities slipping through the cracks and there being no criminal sanction in place to punish persons who may take advantage of loopholes in the law which may currently exist?
Perhaps I could start and then the others could jump in. I'll say a second part first on the legislative framework. I think it is that we can look and see if there are loopholes. I mean, that would be a fairly easy study to do. I'm not aware of things. I mean, we concentrate on what we do and then we say there are criminal sanctions for this or whatever. But yes, I think it would be a good exercise to see if things are falling through the cracks. So that's on the legislative framework. On the criminal, the capacity of the judiciary and the police to enforce the law. I mean, I can't comment directly on the capacity or experience, but we do know that it would be important because there's no point in having legislation, controls, regulation, and penalties if they are not enforced, and if they are not seen to be enforced, because it's important for people to know. Just like in the US, you have a problem. Well, you get fined and it is public and it's made public and it's the next day. So because that is not only a penalty, but is a strong deterrent. If someone knows that they can thing will drag on for a long time, well, they take their time. So I think precision and capacity to enforce fairly but quickly would be important to again shore up trust and to also give confidence to the regulators themselves, because we don't want to be doing it and then, it just drags on forever. So I think the coordination, I think the implementation would be important.
Sorry.
Yes. We must close on that very, very important note. We will take the central bank, which has been very, very, very key to this, in this whole process. We'll take you off the hot seat and move to Ministry of Finance. In the Ministry of Finance, how are you going to be raising public awareness about the benefits and safety of using electronic payment systems? And do you see any challenges with the uptake of these facilities used by the public? Ministry of Finance?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So as we would have indicated in our written submission, we have begun to facilitate certain e-payments via respect to some of the public sector agencies like the judiciary and some others. We're currently focused on looking at the payments, facilitating full online payments of taxes through the Customs and Excise and the Board of Inland Revenue. We are, with respect to the specific outreach, public sector outreach, I'll ask the controller, that too is in its embryonic stages, but I'll ask the controller to provide some additional details on that part of it.
Ms. Laban?
Hi, good morning again. As PS indicated, yes, we have started an outreach. Now this is really, we have looked at the larger receivers of revenue. Those are the ministries whom we targeted first to look at their readiness. We look at their readiness for e-payments and their volume of transactions. And we work with them to bring about online payments. Currently, we do have online credit cards. Some ministries are utilizing that right now, and debit cards. Thank you.
And the next person with you is Nelisha Bali, because she wasn't introduced earlier. Yes? All right. So now Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, Chair, if I may, I just wanted to take off on just on that answer, and it speaks to the relevance of fintech, as I just noted with the central bank. Just if you just look at what was accepted by the various ministries as indicated there, it was credit cards, debit cards, and that requires you to be fully banked. The advent of fintech allows for people who are either underbanked or unbanked to participate in it, and I think that is possibly where the previous question was going from that came in online as to the relationship between the IFC, iGov, and so on, as to whether or not the ministries would be embracing fintech as part of its program of rollout for accepting and for paying out of money. Is that part of how the rollout is relative to your roadmap for digital payments?
You had anything you wanted else to find out, Mr. Bacchus?
Probably they could start there. I think that sets the stage for some of the pieces I want. But I would prefer if they could answer that piece for me, please.
All right.
Yes, with respect to the unbanked and underbanked, we are currently looking at payment service providers. We have done financial instructions in draft, and we are looking at that currently to get it approved so that it can cater for the underbanked currently.
And of course, your roadmap for digital payments, as identified, there are a number of assets to it. Could you just elaborate a bit on it and identify, how the rollout of it is going to go and for the benefit, who will benefit and what the benefits will be?
Currently, we have, the roadmap goes until December 2022. We are looking at between January to April. We have some ministries we are looking at, which includes the judiciary for online bill payments, because they are the ones, they came to us first for the online bill payments, which includes the unbanked. We also have the licensing department with Ministry of Works. So they are also on the roadmap for between January and to April for implementation. There's also between May and August 2022, the Registrar General's Department and Immigration Division, who we will be working with closely to also bring about online bill payments. Registrar General, by the way, they are already doing online credit cards as well as intellectual property. And we also have Inland Revenue and Customs. They are also two large receivers of revenue. And for the latter part of the year, we are looking at also bringing them online, particularly with ACH transactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and members. Nalisha Bali here. I'd just like to add to what the Comptroller has said. One of the members previously had indicated they were trying to get online with TT BizLink and the Ministry of Trade. Just to give you an update on that, is that we have the Treasury Division have been working with the Ministry of Trade in ensuring that the single electronic window and the TT BizLink can be rolled out to all ministries and departments who are ready to go online. We have had the first meeting already, and the next meeting will be scheduled soon. These are for ministries and departments that do not have the software facilities to go on their own. Smaller ministries and departments that will be using the TT BizLink and SEW, and we are all collaborating with Ministry of Trade in order to get that happening soon.
Yes, thanks. I know there are a number of products in the market. The Ministry of Trade and the SEW represents one. I know there's GovPay that also exists in a number of other ministries as well. And all of them will have to eventually accept and adapt to payments and or issuance of payments relative to this advent of fintech being incorporated into it and not remain limited to debit and credit cards. Yes? So I trust this is the way in which we'll go as it relates to this. Thank you, Chair.
Now, in your submission, you had pointed out, in fact, in a table outlining pieces of legislation in need for further strengthening. What is the approach taken by the ministry to address these legislative gaps? And how will these relevant changes be prioritized? Ministry of Finance?
Yes, but it's different. There are different pieces of legislation
Yes.
That will require certain levels of approval. The Data Protection and Electronic Transactions Act in particular, these are being looked at currently by the Ministry of Public Administration. Okay. The others.
Because you had a whole list of them that you provided. Financial Intelligence Unit Act, Raise Taxes and Licenses, Payment by Check, Stamp Duty Act, Stamp Duty Special Provision Act, Financial Institution Act, Electronic Transfer of Funds, Negotiable Instrument, Dishonored Check Act, Consumer Protection and Safety Act, and so on. You know, and a lot more. Anti-Terrorism, Proceeds of Crime Act, Forgery Act, Freedom of Information, Data, Electronic Transaction, Attachment of Earnings Maintenance Act, Exchequer and Audit Act. So in fact, you've done the work in identifying where the gaps are. What next?
Can we ask that we do some further and put this in writing to you all?
We will certainly look forward to receiving that information. Once it's not available here, we always welcome. So it will go, you know, what information you can provide, having studied, and we'll get a more comprehensive report from you. So it will go into our final reports. So we thank you for that. And of course, we will give you a gentle reminder.
Chair, if I may, we have a question or suggestion, specifically with the table of legislative changes. Could perhaps the ministry identify which agency, because I think some of these pieces of legislation, amendments to them would have to be driven by various regulators and so on. So if they could identify the persons responsible, as well as I think it is critical, well, they could also give us a priority ranking, but I think we also need to find out where or how they intend to work these proposals into the government's overall legislative agenda, because it's all well and good for us to identify what needs to be done. But of course, technocrats at the ministry level or even at the level of the central bank, SEC, FIU, don't take legislation forward and get it drafted. So I think we need to get on each piece of legislation, because as you mentioned, it's comprehensive, where they have reached in terms of identifying policy changes, or where it has been sent to someone, or you know, to identify what has to be done and what has to be strengthened. So we'd like to get, I think it'll be useful for us to get that information. And identifying responsibility.
Chairman?
I think Mr. Hussain has been there before you, and I haven't heard his voice yet. So right after Mr. Hussain, I will take you, Mr. Scott.
If Mr. Scotland has a question for the Minister of Finance, I could always defer to him, because, Chair, you had asked a question I initially wanted to ask, and I wanted to move on to the FIU. So if Mr. Scotland wants to go ahead, he can.
Very well. Mr. Scotland, the floor is yours.
Chairman, thank you. The move away from cash-based transactions to what I will call the Fintech use. How is the Ministry of Finance going to liaise? What is the plan to liaise with its partners to getting that buy-in from the general public? Is there a plan? Through you, Chair. What is the plan and how is it going to be implemented?
Remember, if I can start, and then maybe Ms. Bali and Ms. Laban can add. There is ongoing discussion with the regulators between the Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, TT sector to the extent. And there are committees that meet, but with respect to a specific plan, a one strategic direction, a document, I don't believe that we are there yet. But but I know that is the intention. So, but at this point in time, I don't think we have a comprehensive plan. The Ministry of Finance might have its own plans. And like I said, we discuss, we talk, we have a general agreement, but with respect to identifying a specific strategic direction that everybody is party to, I don't think we're there yet. I don't know, Nalisha and Catherine.
If I may add to what PS has indicated, while there's no strategic plan for us in terms of moving towards a cashless environment, we are driven by the needs of the ministries, and the ministries are the one who will come to us in terms of their readiness for cashless environment. For instance, if they are ready for an online credit card system, debit cards, or pay. The new thing we have now working on is a payment system provider for top-up vouchers. Now we have reached to that phase because those are those are where the ministries have indicated that they would like to go. You will appreciate that we have to do financial instructions in order to provide a secure environment in which ministries can operate under these. We have done so already for a debit card and also for online credit card. Presently, as the Comptroller has indicated, we have drafted financial instructions for a payment system provider for top-up cards. Those are in the final phase of being approved, and then it will roll out to the ministry. We can only move forward when the ministry have approached us in terms of the method of payments that they would like to use, and that is what we have before us now at the Ministry of Finance.
And if I can just add one more thing, another area of focus, specific focus for the Ministry of Finance is to fully digitalize tax payments. So currently we're just finalizing a technical assistance agreement with the Andean Development Bank to look at the Customs and Excise Division as well as the Board of Inland Revenue Division, the Inland Revenue Division, to help us design a map, a roadmap to get to full digitalization of all taxes across the board.
Right. May I continue, Chair?
Your question, FIU? To
Chair?
FIU?
May I continue? Yes.
No, yes, no, but I just wanted to remind Ms. Lakshmi. She had a question that she wanted to ask to this entity before we move on.
Just
consultancy.
Yeah, about the consultancy specifically. Well, I think that was sort of answered in terms of you all are using the financial inclusion data. And I think when do you expect that it would be concluded? But I also wanted, after you answer that question, does the Ministry of Finance not, you talked about ministries coming to you to indicate what their needs are and so on. If we want a real push and a drive towards a cashless society, does the Ministry of Finance not see itself as taking on a role where it goes out to every public body and public entity and agency to sort of say, well, hey, let's get this done and tell us what you need and send people into that, because some of them don't even know what they need. You know, and again, we still live in a society where, and I, up to last year, spent 2 hours waiting on a cashier to return somewhere to transact business at a government office. Because nobody but the cashier could sign a piece of paper for me to collect a check. Now, because the Ministry of Finance, somebody has championed this move. And when I hear things like, well, we don't really have a strategic plan and one person something and somebody else, do we not need something of somebody to be the driver of this, and to have what you have to call it a strategic plan, but to have a plan and to reach out rather than waiting for everybody to step out and say, could I get could I get onto the city window, please? Could I get on to GovPay? I think this is necessary for me. Who is really going to champion this process?
For the question, member, and while we may not have a strategic plan, we do have a roadmap in which the Ministry of Finance, Treasury Division, and the TTIFC is working towards in getting digitized payments by the end of December 2022. Sorry. We have been working with the Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center to start implementing some of the facilities out there. Now we have started looking at a number of directions in which ministries want to go. Now, your question about getting to the other ministries, the TTIFC is working with the Treasury Division to bring on all ministries forward into using these platforms. For the ministries that do have the software to start financial payments, we have reached out to them in terms of coming on to e-payments. And for those ministries that are very small, we are urging them to use the single electronic window, because we have been working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry in terms of TT BizLink and the single electronic window.
Chairman, Chair.
Please proceed.
I know Honorable Minister and Senator Backus is here. Have the entities who are before us considered the new legislation that has been passed relative to the financial sector that we passed in Parliament, the Revenue Authority? And what about partnering with the Ministry of Digital Transformation to get some assistance in order to expedite this process? Have you considered that? One, how does this framework now accord with the new Revenue Authority? And has the entities, all these stakeholders who are appearing before us, have you all contacted, liaised, linked with, sought assistance from the Ministry of Digital Transformation, which you must agree, Chair, should be involved in this process? And we have Senator Backus here.
Absolutely correct.
Yes, we have actually formed a working committee with all of those entities on the committee. There's Ministry of Digital Transformation, Public Administration, Central Bank, Bankers Association, as well as the Treasury, the International Financial Center. So yes, there is a working group that has been formed, and they have been working closely together on the various methods of e-payments.
Do you have a deadline? Is there a deadline or cutoff point where at least some working document can be presented so that this JSC can have something where we can now do a report to the Parliament and say, look, this is implementation time, this is our time frame. Do you have a time frame for a startup date?
We have been we have been mandated to go digitize by the end of December 2020. What we do have and we can provide to the committee is the financial regulations we have for debit card, receipt of revenue via debit card, online credit card, and we also have the draft instructions, which we can provide to you all for you to have a view of and your comments.
Right. And Chair, my last and my question on this issue is directed across the board. You will, and you know of instances where persons in the normal, regular banking system, Chair, people are subjected to fraud So you get a bill on your credit card to say that you spent $3,000 in a hotel in Dubai, but you have not. And yet it takes the normal banking system 6 months to, you have no fault. Your money is stolen by you by some issue, systemic issue with your provider, the banks. What safeguard measures the central bank, even FIU and the Ministry of Finance are putting in place to avoid this pitfall and to protect the users of this fintech system? Chairman, my questions produce silence.
I have observed that.
That's all. Not
You're thinking, it's so deep, you know, people have to think. Mr. Scotland?
I didn't want to break protocol if it's the Ministry of Finance. Should I start?
No, I directed it across the board.
Yes. No, you raise a very important point. And again, it's a question of companies that may be trying to protect themselves and they don't know, and they protect themselves so much that it disadvantages the customer. So it is a reality. What we at the central bank have is something called a market conduct framework, where companies, financial institutions that are licensed by us must communicate with their customers in plain language exactly terms and conditions of service of any product. So if you have a credit card, then you know that you have that it is possible that something like this would happen. It may not be something that you really enjoy, because whether it says that you can be out of pocket for 3 weeks, it may not help. But at least you know that it is that you could be subject to that. We also encourage them to move things along as quickly as possible. On occasion, we may have to, because people do write us, right? We have two avenues for this. One is a more general kind of inquiry as to what is happening, and in some certain cases, we may take it up with an institution at the central bank per se level. Then we also have the Office of the Financial Services Ombudsman, who has two functions. One is information, and two is the redress function. So if something is really illegal, the institutions are doing something illegal or that is going too far, then this ombudsman could step in and in a sense, order them to comply. But most times what happens is that the dialogue results in a resolution before that time. So the person says, listen, I have this problem in my bank. I've talked to them. They're still not satisfying me. The ombudsman looks at it. They investigate. They talk to the financial institution. And sometimes this alone just clears it up to make sure that things move. So apart from the redress, we have the market conduct, and we have dialogue, and to keep the institutions and the public sensitized as to what's going on.
The Chairman,
Mr. Scotland,
may I ask, what are the challenges? Chairman, that echo is not coming from me. I only have one device on.
Nobody's complaining. Please proceed, Mr. Scotland.
Right. Chairman, what are the challenges that are anticipated when this, so I'm presupposing that we get up and running, but when you get up and running, Chair, if you presuppose your challenges in up and running, you can cater for it. What are the challenges that are anticipated in this transition, and how in your pre-planning process do the entities see themselves mitigating relative to these challenges? So we're being proactive. And I would like us to list the challenges, please.
Perhaps we can, it seems that is quite challenging. I don't know what you had for breakfast, Mr. Scotland, but you've been asking these very penetrating questions. And we do appreciate because it furthers the discussion and the analysis. But what we can do is to give the entities an opportunity to provide their responses in writing. So we get a considered response. And I thank you for that.
Chairman, your every word commands my obedience, Chairman. So we will get it in writing. Chairman,
you wouldn't say how far back that went, eh?
No, Chairman, you cannot reveal that
I cannot reveal that in this forum, yes.
Chairman, can I give way to the other members, and would you allow me, Chairman, do not disclose it, and would you allow me, I don't want to hog, and would you allow me to come back after, please, with my final, Chairman, you know, I've seen it disclosed, don't disclose it. Chairman, would you allow me to come back after, please, if other members have questions?
Yes, Mr. Scotland. I'm tempted, but I'll keep your secrets.
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, may I?
Oh, certainly. I've been waiting to hear you.
Morning, Member Hussain.
Good morning, Mr. Scotland, and thank you for giving way. Madam Chair, I was not surprised, but to learn that there is no strategic plan in order to convert by the Ministry of Finance to convert the environment into a cashless one. But it goes contrary to the announced policy of the government in terms of, I heard the Prime Minister before indicate that the move is towards a cashless society. And then we heard, well, there's no strategic plan, but there's a roadmap. With all due respect, Madam Chair, before you even take the road, you should have a plan of where you're going. And then I heard that the ministries basically come to the Ministry of Finance in order to determine whether they want to go cashless, and the deadline date for this is December 2022. So what I want to find out from the Ministry of Finance is how many ministries have approached the Ministry of Finance to go cashless, how many have not, how many who have approached are actually cashless. And if you don't reach your December 2022 deadline, are you just going to wait until they ask you that they want to go cashless, or are you going to them to be proactive, as Mrs. Scotland would have indicated earlier?
Member, before Malisha gives you the numbers, I just want to clarify one point in the strategic plan. The TTIFC has been mandated to address the issue of financial inclusion, and they're currently in the RFP mode for a provider to conduct a national survey to establish a base from which a national strategic plan could evolve.
So just for the record, there's no strategic plan. There's works for a strategic plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Yes. Thank you, PS. And I would just like to indicate the ministries and department that has approached us already for EFT, moving forward with EFT payments. And those ministries and departments are the Judiciary, Registrar's General Office, Intellectual Property Office, Immigration Division, the Ministry of Works and Transport, Licensing Division, the Board of Inland Revenue, Customs and Excise, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
And so how many ministries and departments are outstanding?
A large number of them, and it's not just, it's a matter of the readiness of the ministry to go online, because in order to facilitate online payments, there needs to be a platform. And this is the reason why we are working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry for the single electronic window and TT-BizLink, where some smaller ministries and departments that do not have the software and the platform to have their own e-payment solution will use the single electronic window and the TT-BizLink in order to get e-payments into the ministry and to facilitate ease of doing business for the citizens.
Isn't that challenge that you identified was the reason for the creation of the Ministry of Digitalization, to ensure that there's uniformity and standardization throughout the public sector so that these challenges would not happen, so that if all ministries operate on the single software or single technical whatever technical assets that they require, that it becomes easier for all of these ministries and departments to go online, and you can streamline all of these services. So is it that you all are working or in talks with the Ministry of Digitalization and Transformation?
Yes, we are. There's currently a working group which involves the Ministry of Digitalization and Public Administration, the Judiciary, the Ministry of Finance, iGov, and also TTIFC. And there's a steering committee to establish that. So we are now as PS has indicated, there's now a financial inclusion for TTIFC to come up with that strategy. Most of these ministries are working with the TTIFC together with the Ministry of Finance in moving forward with this.
Okay, and thank you. But just for our purposes, if you can provide the committee, and I'm subject to the chair's ruling, in writing of all of the ministries that would have gone online and those that are still outstanding for our own evaluation and assessment. So I wait if the chair will rule on that matter.
Well, I have to be very careful with you because I was just about to say that. So it will be provided.
Chair, if I may. Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Yes, and as the committee knows, in another one of my hats I sit as the Minister of Digital Transformation. I don't sit in this committee. And as such, I do have answers that I won't use this committee to forward for that. We'll get it through the Ministry of Finance. But suffice it to say that the collaborations that are happening at the level of the Ministry of Digital Transformation would involve assessment of the digital readiness of all of the ministries, divisions, and agencies. And as such, its work on the committee that has been stated will identify a broader way in which these things will happen. It is not that every ministry will individually have to come, but they will find themselves within a program that will allow for them to be assimilated into this. Remember, the idea here is about the adoption of technology within ministries, divisions, and agencies that are actually being developed within the private sector. So it's about partnerships and continuous collaboration for the implementation. Getting to a cashless society is not a one-year project. It's not even a 5-year project. It is something that will take more time than that. But it revolves a number of things. And again, the ministry will provide its responses. So I won't use the platform as the minister to deal with it. But I guess in the written responses, you'll get to that. I wanted to ask a question of the ministry, and it has to do with the fact that those same partnerships and the creation of this, while there is significant enthusiasm, there's significant resources required to be able to bring these things, the technology and all of the pieces of it to fruition. I know the ministry had embarked on, the Ministry of Finance that it had stated in its submission that there are things that they are doing incentive-wise to allow for all of these individual entities to make and bring to fruition what it is they want to do within the fintech space. The question I'm asking is, are those things available, and how has that been going? And this is it relative to incentives across the board. And this to the Ministry of Finance.
Ministry of Finance? They are collaborating. That's the important word there. So
just to be clear.
So you have to collaborate both internally and externally. You see, so this is the internal one that's going on here. Almost every time I come here, I use that word collaboration. So we almost left here without my saying my buzzword.
Yes, it's wrong.
So we have been following up with the relevant agencies and to try and keep track of progress. I have to admit progress has been slow, but we continue. We do monthly reports and updates on the progress. I don't have the specific details of the latest progress report with me, but we can seek to update what we had sent previously.
No, so there are a number of incentives available, right, for fintech startups, and that is what I was talking about. The industry itself, while there's significant enthusiasm as identified by the central bank, to turn that enthusiasm into actual products takes more than a will and a know-how. It also takes the ability to find ways to do it, and whether that be financing or other incentives. I know there are a number of them. Some were identified in the submission. I just wanted to find out, whether they actually are available for the use of these industries and so on. And if there is any data available as to how that has been going in terms of applications for it, take up anything of that nature, or is it just because we're still at the beginning why it is there? But to make it known at least that those things do exist.
Minister, there are various stages that we can undertake to get to update the committee on each item with specific progress under each allowance.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
We wish to move on now to FIU, very important, Financial Intelligence Unit. Everybody talks about you, how much information you have and where you're going with it, what's happening. So very, very important entity in the scheme of things.
Sir, may I ask a question to the FIU?
Yes, you want to bowl the first ball? Yes.
Yes. I looked at the submissions of the FIU, and over the past 3 years, being from 2019 to 2022, there were 4,533 SARs. And out of that, only 32 were in fact related to digital transactions, previously being SDRs. Is there a reason why there's such a low reporting of these SDRs, of the virtual currency?
Thank you for that question, Member. What we would have recorded is that 32 out of the over 4,500 SDRs received for the 3-year period were related to virtual currencies. So this would have been financial institutions identifying customers utilizing their credit cards or their personal banking accounts to purchase cryptocurrencies in some international forum, be it an online exchange or submitting their money to a foreign broker. What we would have identified from that is that there seems to be a low uptake for the purchase of virtual currencies occurring so far. But in addition to that, it could very well be that the financial institutions are not considering it to be necessarily suspicious transactions. So the individuals who would have been involved in purchasing it would have declared why they would have done it, and they may have noticed legitimate exchanges being used. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and we spoke of the virtual currencies. I think that's a way to use. So this is in relation to what is commonly we see all over social media in terms of like the forex trading and the Bitcoin.
So
these transactions are in relation to those.
So there are two things that you spoke about there, the forex trading and then the Bitcoin. The foreign exchange trading is an entirely different venue. Those are not considered virtual currencies. Those are fiat currencies of different countries. The cryptocurrencies, on the other hand, Bitcoin, Litecoin, all these different things that we talk about, yes, those are considered virtual currencies. And those would be the types of transactions that may have been reported. Generally, in Trinidad and Tobago, there may be a very risk-averse view towards investing in these cryptocurrencies because, as you can see, the markets, they fluctuate widely. There's no way to tell when the markets will crash, and sometimes. So perhaps that is one of the reasons why persons there have not been that many transactions reported, but that is the information that we can report on so far.
Okay. And the 32 reports that we have that you indicated to us, do you have a value of those 32 reports, the total value?
I don't have that information right now, but I could provide it.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to ask a couple of questions relating to the FIU itself in terms of its readiness. Is there any human resource constraints? Because I know this is a very technical area which requires a lot of technical experts in terms of monitoring, because the FIU being a supervisory authority, is there any human resource constraints within your unit?
Indeed, there is. So at this point in time, we have over 4,000 registrants. That I think we only have about 18 compliance professionals in our compliance departments to monitor those over 4,000 registrants. If more fintech companies come on board to be monitored by the FIU, we would indeed have further human resource constraints. In addition to that, the knowledge constraints for these officers. Remember, the regions that we supervise are not all financial institutions. We do supervise some what we call non-regulated financial institutions, and those are credit unions and money and value transfer services. And those perform activities that are somewhat different from a regular banking institution. So we do not have the knowledge and the expertise to supervise financial institutions that may have more of a banking role to play. And the rest of the industries that we do supervise are the listed businesses. We have attorneys, accountants, jewelers, the PMCs right now. Those are the types of industries that we have the knowledge and the expertise to supervise for AML CFT requirements. If it is that we are required to supervise further fintech businesses, we would need to increase our knowledge base. We have been starting to seek out training for the compliance officers, also for our analysts on the suspicious transactions, and so that we can develop the expertise and the knowledge that is needed to be able to understand how these types of transactions work, to understand the intricacies behind the technology, so that we would be able to identify the risks behind it to assist with the supervision that we need to provide.
And what type of experts would you require in order to increase your knowledge base? Because I got from you that currently there are really no experts in the FIU to monitor these fintech, the fintech department. So what type of experts would you require? And if you have to have a guess in the numbers, because I mean this committee is about making recommendations to strengthen your department.
So the expertise. Now, I'm not an expert in this at all. The technology behind it is very difficult to understand. It takes a while to learn all the terms, etc. But the expertise that we would need is an understanding how electronic transactions work in the first place. And if I may ask the compliance supervisor who's on the meeting with me today to perhaps add to some of the needs of the compliance department. Kevin?
Yes, through the chair, good afternoon to everyone. What we would need, what would be our focus is we need to get a better understanding of the particular sector. Once we have an understanding of the particular sector, what is the risk that the sector poses, we would need to ensure that our staff has an understanding of the AML, CFT risk to this particular sector, how it really works, what is the back end, how that functions, the back end technologies and how that works, and all the various the technology required to monitor these type of transactions and activities. So that's where we're at. That's what we would be seeking in that regard.
Chair, Mr. Hussain, would you allow me to ask?
Sure, Minister Diazing.
Thanks. Chair, to the FIU, I know your unit, and if you correct me if I'm wrong, is more administrative than prosecutorial. You don't have the powers to prosecute. But these SAR reports and STR reports that every year total the billions of dollars, do you keep any tracking mechanism to see how many of these reports, if they are turned over to the investigatory officers, how many of them actually result in some sort of prosecution?
Thank you, Minister Diazing, for that question. Yes, we do. And we do report on it in the annual reports. Unfortunately, I don't have the figures with me today. And we are also required to report to the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force on the number of intelligence reports, as we call it, that would have gone to the police and how many of those would have resulted in prosecutions at the end of the day. As I said, I do apologize. We don't have that information at hand for the committee today. But we can do some internal work here and get back to you and get back to this committee on it.
Member Dialsing?
Sorry, through the chair, of course. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, chair.
I didn't.
Yeah. Would you ask the FIU if it's possible to get that type of report in writing? Actually, how many persons have been prosecuted, broken down by industry, and value of assets seized, if any. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Diaz. Consider it asked. I'm sure we'll get the report. Thank you.
Okay, before you move on from this question, if I may, please respectfully. The FIU, of course, is responsible for the collection of the intelligence and the analysis of the intelligence and then producing those reports to the police for investigation. And the entity that is involved in the prosecution of the offenses would be the DPP's department. We would need to seek the relevant information and number of prosecutions from the DPP's department as well to produce this type of information. So I'm just alerting the committee as to the different organizations that are involved in the entire process that would lead us to the prosecutions at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. Yes?
Chairman?
Yes, who's speaking, please? Oh, Mr. Scott.
Chairman, through you. The FIU would have sat in today and would have seen the fintech, what I would call, Chair, the fintech approach, the proposed fintech approach. How does the FIU intend to position itself to be able to detect transactions that are questionable as we go forward with the fintech approach? Has the FIU thought about that? Have you thought about that? Because cashless is different from cash.
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, the FIU has thought about that, and the general approach for collecting information on any sort of suspicious transaction is through reporting from the reporting entities. These are all of the financial institutions and the listed businesses in Trinidad, and they submit their SCRs to the FIU through, we actually have a reg tech, what we call the FIU Connect, where we receive all of those SCRs. If any amendments, and in fact, this has been considered recently, making some amendments to the format within which we collect the suspicious transaction reports so that certain types of information that would be relevant to the fintech and the technology involved itself could be reported on those SDRs so that we can see trends when those reports are submitted, and we can try to look at any of the specifics and the specific details that may result from suspicions arising from the use of these cashless type of technologies to provide the transactions.
Chairman, my worldview is that the FIU should adopt a multifaceted approach. One is detection, but I think that the intelligence unit should also have an approach that engages the public to advise. I am not getting that aspect. What about the advisory? Is the FIU, I've not seen it, I've not seen a reach out. Is the FIU going to be involved in advising, for example, the public relative to compliance, relative to how to comply, where they have to go, new businesses that are set up? What steps are being put in place to make the FIU more, to improve the advisory nature of the FIU, or you do not think that it's advisory?
So I will answer that question in two parts. I will take one part and then I'll pass on to our compliance supervisor for the advice on compliance portion. So the analysis division of the FIU, who receives all of these suspicious transaction reports and analyzes them, they do in fact put out advisories when they see trends in certain types of suspicious activity occurring. Most recently, over the COVID-19 period, over the last 2 years, we would have seen a rise in what we're calling romance scams, where lots of vulnerable Trinidad and Tobagonians have been subjected to fraudulent romantic encounters online. And when I say fraudulent romantic encounters, I mean that they're being asked to provide funds to assist someone who claims to be in love with them to overcome some misgiving. So the FIU has, in fact, conducted advisory sessions with not only law enforcement, but also with the public through launching some social media outreach facilities, as well as through posting some guidance and some advisories online with respect to the suspicious transactions and the suspicious activities that we have noticed in the past. And if such activities occur with respect to Fintech and these new technologies, the same will be done. So now I'll hand over to Kevin to speak on the compliance end.
Yes, so through the assistance of our analytical division, that particular division will identify trends and typologies. And so the compliance and outreach division would utilize those trends and typologies and all that information to inform our division as it relates to what type of outreach and awareness sessions that we can develop and put out there to our listed businesses, our supervised entities, and to the general public. So we continue to work in that light with respect to pushing forward outreach and awareness sessions that will cater and will tailor and treat with those particular type of issues. Some of the outreach and awareness sessions that we sort of focused on as well is the STR reporting, looking at the red flags and those particular alerts. We also look at customer due diligence measures and effectiveness of the customer due diligence measures and things like that. Also, through our compliance examinations, we have the opportunity to discuss and to test the entity as it relates to their level of compliance. And in that, we are able to understand what type of business that the entity is actually performing and what is the risk, what type of risk that it poses. Yes, so those are the two areas that we primarily focus on.
And of course, you don't want to say everything, because, we are very good in Trinidad and Tobago. So you might find that you'll be giving away information so that people can cover up very easily. So you know what you have to do and how you have to do it. Not everything you can talk, yes?
Yes, sure.
Mm-hmm. Chair, if I may.
We want to finish about 12:45, so we really must go on to the Trinidad and Tobago Securities Exchange Commission.
Chair, before you ask one question of the FIU, I think it's an important question. I would like to just get a quick response from any of them. Specifically, has the FIU considered the risk of its registrants utilizing Fintech in a way to us? Because as we know, these persons who you supervise are persons who can be used as vehicles for money laundering. So have you done a risk assessment in terms of how Fintech could be abused by your registrants? And in terms of your compliance inspections, have you incorporated anything in your compliance inspections thus far to assist you in detecting whether or not your registrants are in fact utilizing Fintech in a way that could be risky or that could open them up to being used or abused, or for them facilitating money laundering specifically. And secondly, since 2017, there has been a position adopted by FATF with respect to, having financial innovation take place with respect to fintech and regtech, but it must be in line with your AML CFT standards. Could you update us as to, what the position looks like from FATF or CFATF perspective in terms of what we could expect for standards, and have you all been anticipating this? Because as we all know, FATF will meet in June and can perhaps come up with a whole new set of standards that countries will be required to comply with. And therefore, it may be a good idea to preempt us and to not be on the back foot, and to start preparing ourselves from a regulatory standpoint to be able to say that we are doing certain things and we have things in place to comply with any new standards that may be coming out. Are there working groups? Are there any sort of position papers being put out there for comment so far with respect to FATF standards to deal with fintech?
Thank you very much. I'll handle the second question, and I'll pass on to Mr. Radix for the first question on compliance. So with respect to the FATF standards and the steps that we are taking to bring ourselves in line with any anticipated standards or current standards, yes, we do have several working groups in place. We have the supervisory working group where we work together with the central bank and the TTSEC on developing any policies for legislation. Our most recent committee came up with some views on digital identity and the acceptance of digital identity for onboarding of customers in financial institutions. So we know that with fintech and digitization, the real reach here is to not have face-to-face transactions take place. So we really do need to have a good legislative standing when it comes to the acceptance of digital identity and how to verify the digital identity. So we have been working on policies with respect to that, but I do know that there are other organizations, other ministries that may also be working on policies simultaneously. And I would actually would like one of the considerations of the committee to be that the FIU be included in any of those additional discussions that are taking place. Apart from that, the FATF would have updated its recommendation 15 on new technologies in 2018. Several Caribbean islands have been reassessed on recommendation 15 and their compliance. Now, the amendments to recommendation 15 concern virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, and those would be considered the cryptocurrencies and any other virtual asset that does not represent fiat currency or any other financial instrument as already covered. What we have been doing on our end is gap analysis on our legislation to determine what are the holes that need to be filled, what are the new pieces of legislation or the new provisions that may need to be provided to fill those gaps. These things are still a work in progress, and we are also working together with the CBDT and the central bank through the SWG, as well as on the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee with respect to developing any changes to legislation for compliance with recommendation 15 that may be necessary. So, Kevin?
Thank you. Through the chair, through our collaboration with the Fintech committee, the FIU, what we have been doing is a sort of an information gathering process. So we are gathering the information as it relates to these particular type of entries into the market and entrance into the market. And what we are doing is attempting to look at what risks they would pose to our listed businesses and non-regulated financial institution. So we are at the point where there is an information gathering. However, as it relates to the supervision of our entities and as it relates to compliance examinations on what are we doing differently, what we look at is there is a great emphasis on technology and looking at technology and how technology is developing and evolving and how that can impact on the how that could actually impact on the threat, create that threat to any of our registrants. Also, what we have been focusing on is the onboarding customers. So that's as I indicated earlier, the CDD information, that CDD, that onboarding process. We are focusing on that onboarding process, but not only the onboarding process, but the ongoing monitoring process of our existing existing clients. So what we do is encourage and advise our entities or registrants through our compliance examinations and through our outreach and awareness sessions about the importance of transaction monitoring, or the importance of ensuring that there is screening taking place as it relates to the mandatory sanction list when onboarding takes place. So this is what we are looking at. We continue to work in progress. We are working on it. So this is where we are actually at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Radix. Now I must go to Trinidad and Tobago Securities Exchange Commission.
Good day, Chair.
And my question to you is, good afternoon. Some fintech products, such as cryptocurrencies, are subject to high amounts of speculation. Therefore, rates of exchange may fluctuate quite significantly. That's quoting from your paper. And tell me, are the current stock market and the service providers equipped to introduce cryptocurrency into its offerings? I mean, I know a lot of people in Florida are going crazy over it. Some doing well, some crying after they get a big amount.
That is correct. In terms of cryptocurrency, has seemed to engage the minds of everyone because of everything that is associated with it. The fact that there is an area where you can probably get a lot of gain, and persons, of course, are getting into this just because of the excitement of it all. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they totally understand what it is that they're getting into. So we at the SEC, the way how we are looking at it is that we are focusing on increasing the investors' understanding of cryptocurrencies, especially in terms of that aspect of fintech. What we have done is actually, I believe in 2020, we launched an online fintech pledge so that persons who want to get into any type of fintech, especially in cryptocurrencies, will do or pledge to do some background work to understand what's involved in it. In terms of the exchanges being available or capable of doing any cryptocurrency trading at this point, because that's another thing. Cryptocurrency could be seen in two ways. One, as a security in terms of how it's traded, or two, in terms of a core currency in that it could be used to actually purchase or acquire goods or conduct commerce, etc. Crypto exchanges are actually quite different in terms of what may be required for them, because of the transparent aspect of the blockchain on which the cryptocurrencies would actually exist, right? As well as in terms of understanding where the cryptocurrencies are actually originating and where they're actually going to be sold. Generally, internationally, there is a separate registration class associated for crypto exchanges. We at the SEC, we haven't developed that class as yet, that registration class as yet, but what is required is an enhanced level of monitoring, of reporting, almost an intraday type of interaction with the regulator, especially if it is that they've come across something where the exchange would like to halt any type of withdrawal. Because the way how cryptocurrencies work with a crypto exchange is that an exchange can receive the submissions in, any requests coming in, or any Bitcoins or any types of cryptocurrency into the crypto exchange to be able to facilitate a trade. But even if they think that they might be a suspicious, it might be a suspicious transaction. But even in terms of the exchange itself, the exchange could actually act as a one in a trading way, where it looks at it as if it's a security, or two as a pass-through in terms of someone paying someone else in the cryptocurrency. And hence why that exchange feature is quite different to what we may have right now, existing right now, where it focuses on securities in itself. So basically, I hope I answered your question in going through those aspects. Sorry, I'm not hearing.
One more question for you.
Sure.
You stated in your submission that you all have launched your own SuperTech named Electronically Advanced Submission Interface, which will digitize a number of processes used to interact with registrants. What percentage of the SEC registrants are currently utilizing this interface, and what notable improvements have you observed in your interfacing with registrants since the system's implementation?
Thanks for that question. Actually, it's quite interesting. In terms of why we call it SupTech, it's because it's supervisory technology. And it means that it's actually starting from the supervisors themselves, putting something in place to be able to interact with its registrants. What we have launched so far would be the onboarding aspect as well as the registration aspect. This SupTech is actually it's multi-phased. So we intend to launch a corporate finance phase as well as a macro-prudential reporting aspect of it as well. What we have seen is that there hasn't been as large an uptake as we would have preferred for the Easy platform. I think one of the things is that the onboarding process is quite detailed. The registrants, we are not porting our information and putting it in. We are asking the registrants to put it in and verify their information as they put it into the system. And even in doing that and what is associated with that, you'd see that they would start and they might stop or they may come back to it. But what has actually happened is that the ones who have endured and come through the process, when they do submit registrations into us, the turnaround time is faster. Why? Because of the way how the system is actually working. It does pre-checks in terms of submissions coming in. So where we would, let's say that in the manual system, have a checklist of all the things that may be required in order to conduct a registration of a particular type of registrant or particular type of product, and persons submit a registration package to us, and then the SEC has to actually go through and itemize and determine if all of these things came in, what the quality of these documents are, etc. That has been removed, or the pressure of that has been removed off of the SEC to the registrants. So when the registrants are submitting to us, they have to ensure that they submit the entire package before coming to us, so that when we get it, it is a full and complete package that we could actually take and progress. In terms of the numbers, as I said, it's not as much of a uptake as we would have liked, where it's at about 10% of our registrants being fully onboarded, and you have to be fully onboarded first before you can actually access all the functionality associated with the system. It is something that we thought about internally in terms of what we can do to progress this uptake and things that we can actually put in place. We've actually started to have liaison officers working directly with registrants to get them through the entire process, one point of contact, someone who can actually guide them through everything to get it to the end. And also what we do intend to do as well is promote the difference in terms of timelines that we see when persons actually utilize the registration system.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I wouldn't say I thank you for your patience because you've been waiting here all day to be able to say your piece. Now, if I say we save the best for last, the others will get jealous. So I won't say that. But I'm very grateful that you had all this enthusiasm and verve at the end of this long session. So, but we're still not finished with you because we still have to have our closing remarks. And so we begin with Central Bank and we're keeping it short and sweet.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, we'd like to thank the committee for this timely focus on fintech at this high level of Parliament, but also in a way that reaches the general public. We think that's very important, and we think the momentum will build tremendously from this intervention. We've learned a lot from this exercise and the penetrating questions asked, including on one, legislation such as, and we will look at the 2020 Bahamas legislation. Two, the need for even greater collaboration among regulators. Three, the primary role of law, the security agencies and the judiciary in helping to enforce measures. And four, the primacy of educating the public appropriately. So the central bank stands ready to contribute, educate, assist in facilitating the modern, efficient, and safe fintech solutions in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you. Ministry of Finance.
Madam Chair, like the Central Bank, we are very grateful for this session today. We've taken away a lot of information, and we do intend to focus our attention more on getting a cohesive strategic direction, having a greater outreach to the ministries, and we will get back to you on all of the information that we had promised in the shortest possible time. So thank you again.
FIU?
Yes, Chair. Likewise, the FIU is eternally grateful for being able to be part of this committee and to be able to share our views on this topic, and also to hear from the rest of the members what their role and responsibilities are so that we can all try to contribute and assist each other accordingly. We look forward to the outcomes of this committee and the recommendations that could be made that can benefit not only the FIU, but the greater financial and social and economic environment in Trinidad and Tobago. And we will also endeavor to provide the committee with the information that it requested of us today. So thank you very much.
Securities Exchange Commission.
Thank you. And we would also like to thank the committee for engaging the supervisory authorities and the Ministry of Finance on this, because it takes that level of collaboration to progress this matter. It is hoped that coming out of this, that the areas of concern which may hinder the development of fintech in Trinidad and Tobago will be contemplated, and any assistance which can be provided to advance this area would be appreciated. We also remain available to address any other questions that may come out or arise out of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for coming here today, taking time off your busy schedule. It is not often we get to hold the head of the central bank captive for quite a while. So I thank you very much today for all the education. I think the members of the public, as well as we are, better informed than we were before. And we recognize that, in fact, this is something that is going on. Perhaps we were not giving a name to it, but we can see the benefits, the speed, and because sometimes you put something in the bank, you put the money in the bank to send it, and before it reaches the person, the bank holding the funds for a long time. So now you see the speed of the transaction, the security of the transaction. We see, though, that there is still a lot to be done in terms of people need to put in strategic plan, the various entities. We see that there's need for collaboration within the organization. and among the organizations and also with those abroad, which has already started. So I am grateful that you all recognize, those of you to whom it's applicable, that you have homework to do and you will be doing that homework, and we look forward to receiving that. So there are many benefits, and I'm sure that the public is very grateful for what you've brought to the table this afternoon, and we will continue with our next session. I would like to thank the committee members who participated remotely in this virtual hearing. Thank you very much for your incisive questioning. And this is perhaps my last opportunity to say to my former vice chair, Mr. Rambarat, thank you very much for your contribution once again. And on the next occasion, we'll have an essential deputy who will be sitting to assist me. And you know that perhaps a hard taskmaster. I'm very, very grateful also to the viewing and listening audiences who sent questions. And of course, we're going to look again at those who are whose questions have not been aired. We will again look to see how we can use those questions. And I must thank my left hand, my right hand, my very able supporters, the staff of the Parliament, who are always there to offer all the support, logistical and otherwise. They do a lot of work behind the scenes. I'm eternally grateful to them. And I wish them continued good health. Yes? So that you will be, we didn't have one last time, so that all of you will be well to continue this tremendous work. So thank you, all of you. It has been a long session. We took advantage of the fact that there is no house sitting this afternoon. And I'm truly sorry I don't have lunch to offer you, but enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I be relieved, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Madam Chair, may we be relieved?
Yes, the meeting is ended. Thank you very much. Of course, if you want to remain,
we don't want to remain. Right, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye, everyone. Have a good afternoon.